Help me to stay competitive against the big multinational corporations by subscribing to this channel, hitting the notification bell, liking the video, and maybe leaving a comment in the comment sections below. Thank you very much and enjoy the video. Greetings freethinkers, welcome to the Hodcast. Okay, we have seen in the news, even the mainstream media are talking about it these days, which just goes to show you the scale of the problem, and they know that certainly since the Rotherham grooming gang scandal, they know that they cannot ignore this. They just put their head in the sand. Is not going to work. They've been doing that for a long time. They've been afraid to tackle this issue for some bizarre reason. They've been worried about getting called racist by the people who make up these grooming gangs, when in actual fact they are the racists themselves. They are the one who are grooming their victims along racial lines. And here in Peterborough we are no stranger to grooming gang activity. We've had a lot of Muslim grooming gangs targeting working class English girls. I'm 35 years old. I can remember when I was in school that they would come to the school and literally take girls out of the school. I also have 3 female cousins, 2 of which were victims of grooming gangs in their teens. So I know what I'm talking about here. Now we have yet another case of grooming gang activity in Peterborough, which has actually forced the council to shut down one of these grotty takeaways and shisha cafes that the grooming gangs frequently hang out and spend their spare time at. And it is at this particular location, which is on Lincoln Road, which is a area of Peterborough, this city, which is known for a lot of criminality. It is a very diverse area. It literally is Diversity Street, so it comes with all of the problems that we have come to expect from such a thing when cultures clash and cultures collide. And this particular shisha cafe has been shut down. Now this is it here on your screen. The Babylon restaurant has been shut down. I don't know how long it's going to be shut down for. We're going to go over the article. I've walked past this place plenty of times. It is a hotbed of activity for this type of thing, and I'm surprised it has taken so long for this to get shut down, because these places are also frequently used for money laundering, because these grooming gangs, they make a colossal amount of money out of the activities that they partake in, and they clean that dirty money through cash businesses such as places like this. This is why they often get involved in cash businesses, because it's easy to launder money that way if you are a criminal. I mean, that's the way they do things. So let's get into this article now and find out what has happened this time around, and after that we're going to go over why this keeps happening, why they never learn from what we consider as their mistakes. Do they consider it a mistake? We're going to go through that, so let's take a look at the article. Okay, so I'm going to read through this now. The one thing I want to make clear is I don't want anyone turning up here and doing this, that or the other. You know, as much as this type of thing can evoke anger in people, and it should, I suppose, I don't want people using a potential excuse that it was my fault or I suggested that they do X, Y, Z, which is not what I'm doing. I'm just providing to you news and commentary that you won't get from the mainstream media. Okay, so it's the Babylon Lounge, and I like local news, okay? I don't like mainstream media, national and international news. They lie a lot. They will smear people. They will misrepresent. They're not journalists. They're political activists. But for some reason, local news is a bit different. I don't really know why that is. I've said this before on this channel. And it is true, you will often get a much more accurate representation from local news than you do national news. But like I said, I don't really know why that is. So A Peterborough restaurant has been shut down by police after 2 teenage girls reported that they were raped. So they've obviously been invited back to this place, and they were set upon when they were presumably in one of the grotty kind of bed sits that you get upstairs from these places. Babylon Restaurant and Shisha Lounge in Lincoln Road was issued with a temporary closure notice on Wednesday evening, January the 15th, so just Wednesday gone, to close the premises for 48 hours. So they should be open and up and running again now. This morning, so this was just Friday gone, 2 days ago, Friday 17th, a further application was made to Peterborough Magistrates Court for a full closure order to be granted, which was successful and has been served on the premises this afternoon, so they're actually still closed. The restaurant will be closed for the next 3 months, as there are reasonable grounds for believing that in the past 3 months the premises were used for the activities related to the specific you-know-what offence, grooming offence, I can't say it on YouTube, or the premises are likely to be used for such activities. Now, us in the working class community, the English working class community, we've said this for a long time. We've said that this is happening, that they take girls from our community and do this type of thing there. They just see it differently to us. This is something that mainstream politicians are going to have to grapple with. You cannot bury your head in the sand forever. You are going to have to pull your head out of that sand and deal with this issue, because it's not going away. This is a cultural issue. I wish it wasn't. I wish we didn't have this issue, but the fact of the matter is. Now, before I continue, I want to mention that I'm sure a lot of you heard about the Syrian refugee who, him and his family came to Britain, and he was of course put into a local school. Now, he was going around just harassing the local girls in that school. That was not reported on by the mainstream media, but what they did report on is him getting, when one of the English lads at the school got so fed up with what he was doing, he threw some water in his face, basically. The mainstream media portrayed this as waterboarding. They called it torture. They say a Syrian boy was tortured by racists, which is just ridiculous. That Syrian boy and his family were paid £350,000 in compensation, which is a king's ransom. It's more than a king's, it's a fortune. So these people, you got to think, they've gone from nothing, really. They've gone from living in Syria with nothing to living the life of Riley in Britain simply for having water thrown on their face. Now, you don't think about the legions of English girls who have been victims of this grooming gang activity from men who belong to that community. A lot of the groomers were refugees themselves, or alleged refugees anyway, and what do you think those girls get? They got nothing. In most cases, in the vast majority of cases, they did not even get justice, let alone compensation. As for that boy who was fed up with the way the Syrian refugee young man was behaving in his school, him and his family had to go into hiding. They got death threats. They got the obligatory threats of the grooming gang activity on a threat was made to his sister. Basically, I have to watch my words while I talk on YouTube, but a threat of that nature was made to that English boy's sister. So what does that tell you in itself? Now, going back to the story, 4 men consisting of 2 18-year-olds, a 27-year-old and a 16-year-old boy were all arrested in connection with the alleged rape earlier this week, while part of St Paul's Road in Peterborough was cordoned off. So this was a serious attack. My guess is they probably fled. The two victims probably fled out of there immediately in a state of extreme distress for the road to be cordoned off. That's my opinion. And as you see, there's 4 men involved. Now, there is I'll finish reading this, and then there is another aspect that might be controversial, but I want to bring it up. You might disagree with it, you might agree with it. I don't know. That's your right to disagree or agree. So I'll get onto that in a second. Let me just finish reading this. Another 18-year-old man was arrested this morning and remains in custody. So potentially a 5th man was involved in this grooming gang activity. Now you got to remember, those two girls, they're just the tip of the iceberg. I cannot adequately describe to you the level of grooming gang activity by those men against young females that belong to my community. I can't express how bad that situation is here in Peterborough. It is horrendous. It's been going on for as long as I certainly can remember, and most other people. And not only that, it affects almost everyone. Just try to comprehend how serious a situation that is. Okay? Because, like I said, I've got 3 female cousins. 2 of them were grooming gang victims. 2 of 3. And I know I have friends who I knew when I was younger. And as I said to you at the beginning of the video, these grooming gangs would come to the school in their cars and pick them up. That's how bad this is. It's insane how bad the situation is. Okay, so now I'm going to get on to the part which may or may not be controversial, depending on what you consider to be controversial, and that is, in my opinion, more must be done to inform girls from a traditional Western upbringing who have been taught through Marxist education to be extremely open of other communities and cultures whilst actively shunning their own, whilst those other cultures and communities that were encouraged to come and live in Western countries such as Britain, France, Germany, etc., they were encouraged not to open themselves up to other communities. They were encouraged not to open themselves up, especially to the host community in the West. They were encouraged to do their own thing. Even mainstream media politicians admit now that multiculturalism is a failed political doctrine and social experiment. That in itself is offensive. The fact that somebody or a group of people, without the knowledge or the expressed permission of the electorate they claim to represent and serve, they went out of their way to push a social experiment on the people, and now that it's failed, fair play, they're starting to admit it's failed, but now they just admit that it has failed and refuse to change anything. They actively went out of their way to do a social experiment on a biblical scale on their own people, not knowing if it was going to work or fail. And now it's failed, like we all said it would fail, regardless of how many times you called us racist. No, it has failed. You just accept that it's failed and refuse to do anything about it. That being said, it's neither here or there. I've gone off on a tangent. The point I was making was, it's about time that we educated the victims and people who are going to be potential victims of the dangers that these men pose. And it's going to upset the left, of course. It's going to upset the diversity brigade, of course, because you will be talking specifically to Western girls or girls of Western sense, such as in this country English girls, because this happens a lot all over Europe. But in our case, you're going to be discussing and educating specifically Western girls to the danger of specifically men from that other community. And that is going to offend a lot of people. Now, you may agree with me on that this needs to be done. You may not agree with me. That's your choice. But in my opinion, I'm entitled to my own opinion too. This needs to be done because a lot of these girls are walking far too easily into these traps. They're like sheep to the slaughter. It's just too easy for these men, and it's happening all over the United Kingdom, and it has to stop. Something has to be done. We cannot bury our heads in the sand over this anymore. And as for this particular restaurant and Shisha bar, has to lose their license. Get rid of them. And not only that, prosecute them and give the victims of these grooming gangs some worthwhile compensation taken out of the riches that these gangs have. Because if you look at them, they all drive extremely fast, extremely expensive cars. They have their own little property empires. They're money laundering. That's exactly what they're doing. And the victims are nothing but sex slaves. That's what they are, the slaves. People often talk about slavery as if it's a thing of the past. It's not a thing of the past. And slavery is a bad thing, of course it is. We all know slavery is a bad thing. But the way that the left focus entirely on the Atlantic slave trade, the American and European slave trade, whilst actively ignoring the Arabic slave trade, who kept slaves that were both African and European before the European slave trade, during the European slave trade, and after the European slave trade, even up to today. But that doesn't fit the narrative of the left, the globalists, or the mainstream media, so it's actively ignored. We have slavery in this country right now. Our own people are victims to it, and we are victims to slavery thanks to the failed social experiment that is multiculturalism. Something that should have never been foisted on the people, whether we wanted it or not, which I can assure you we did not. Thank you for watching the video. Let me know what you think in the comments. I'd like to hear, if you come from elsewhere in the British Isles, I would like to know what it's like in your area. Is this still happening? Because people often talk about the Rotherham scandal as if it only happened in Rotherham. It didn't. It was happening before all over the country. It was happening during the Rotherham scandal all over the country, and it's been happening all over the country since the Rotherham scandal, including Rotherham. It's still happening in Rotherham. What a slap to the face. What a slap to the face. That is a slap, and it is humiliation. It's adding insult to an already egregious injury inflicted on our people by people we were never asked if we wanted them even to come and live here. Let me know what you think in the comments. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you and goodbye.